Long before there was any nation called Germany, the heart of Europe, stretching from the Baltic and North Sea down to the snowy Alps, was already a cradle of human life. When the great ice ages finally loosened their grip, Mesolithic hunter-gatherers began roaming these fertile valleys, followed in time by Neolithic farmers, who brought with them the first seeds of settled agriculture. Over thousands of years, these early communities grew into distinct Bronze and Iron Age cultures. By the last centuries before Christ, the region revealed a striking cultural split. Celtic tribes thrived in the south, while to the north, a new force was emerging. Germanic tribes, whose roots reached back to Scandinavia. Gradually, the Celts of southern Germany were absorbed by these expanding Germanic peoples. By the dawn of the Roman Republic's expansion, they controlled nearly all the land between the Rhine and the Danube, two mighty rivers that formed a natural frontier with the ever-growing Roman world. In the 1st century BCE, contact with Rome increased. Julius Caesar himself led legions across the Rhine into what the Romans called Germania. Yet these early expeditions yielded little. When Augustus became emperor in the early 1st century CE, Rome attempted a more determined conquest. But in 9 CE, their ambitions met disaster. 3 Roman legions were annihilated in the dark Teutoburg forest by a coalition of Germanic warriors. The shock of this defeat forced Rome to abandon its dream of conquering Germania, fixing the empire's border along the Rhine and Danube behind a chain of fortifications known as the Limes Germanicus. Rome's retreat did not end contact between these two worlds. Trade caravans and occasional skirmishes kept the frontier alive with tension and exchange. Roman merchants carried wine, glassware, and fine pottery northward, while Germanic traders sent furs, amber, and slaves to the empire. Over generations, this constant interaction slowly transformed the tribes along the border. Some adopted Roman coinage and military tactics. Others served as mercenaries in Roman armies. Yet the forested heart of Germania remained fiercely independent, a patchwork of clans bound more by kinship than by kings. By the late 2nd and 3rd centuries, the Roman Empire began to strain under its own weight. Civil wars and external attacks weakened the once unshakable frontier. Seizing their moment, powerful tribal confederations emerged. The Alemanni in the southwest, the Franks along the lower Rhine, and the Saxons by the northern coast. They were no longer loose families of warriors, but organized peoples capable of challenging Rome's authority. In the 4th and 5th centuries, a greater storm swept across Europe, the great migration of peoples fleeing or following the Huns from the east. Entire Germanic tribes, Visigoths, Vandals, and others, poured across Roman borders, carving new kingdoms from imperial lands. In 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed under this pressure, a fall in which these Germanic nations played a decisive role. As the smoke of Rome's empire faded, a new political landscape began to take shape. Among the shifting tribes, one would rise to dominate the region that would one day be called Germany. The Franks. Their story would lay the foundation for a medieval realm that echoed far beyond its own time. From the chaos of Rome's fall emerged the Franks, a confederation of Germanic tribes whose influence would stretch far beyond the Rhine. By the late 5th century, a young and ambitious chieftain named Clovis seized control. Through a combination of relentless warfare and shrewd alliances, Clovis united the rival Frankish clans and carved out a powerful kingdom in what is now France and Western Germany. His most consequential decision, however, was not made on the battlefield. Around 500 CE, Clovis converted to Christianity, earning the support of the Roman Catholic Church and giving his rule a divine legitimacy that his rivals could not match. Over the next 2 centuries, the Frankish realm expanded under the Merovingian and then the Carolingian dynasties. Its most legendary ruler, Charlemagne, Charles the Great, came to power in the late 8th century. A warrior king and visionary statesman, Charlemagne forged an empire that stretched from the Pyrenees to the Elbe, uniting much of Western and Central Europe for the first time since Rome. In the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans, a title that symbolically revived the Western Empire and laid the foundation for what would become the Holy Roman Empire. Yet the grandeur of Charlemagne's empire was short-lived. After his death in 814, internal disputes and external pressures splintered his realm. By the Treaty of Verdun in 843, the empire was divided among his grandsons, creating separate spheres that roughly foreshadowed modern France and Germany. The eastern portion, East Francia, would evolve over the following centuries into the core of a distinct German realm, ruled by powerful dukes and rising kings who sought to carry on the legacy of imperial Rome in their own way. East Francia, the Eastern Frankish kingdom, slowly transformed into the heartland of what would later be known as Germany. In 919, the German dukes chose Henry the Fowler of Saxony as their king, a pragmatic ruler who strengthened defenses against Magyar raids and laid the groundwork for a stronger monarchy. His son, Otto I, would carry this vision even further. In 962, after defeating the Magyars at the Battle of Lechfeld, Otto was crowned emperor by the Pope in Rome. This act marked the official birth of the Holy Roman Empire, a realm that claimed to revive the authority of ancient Rome while anchoring itself firmly in the German lands. The Holy Roman Empire was less a unified state than a complex web of duchies, bishoprics, and free cities bound together by tradition and the authority of an emperor elected by powerful princes. For centuries, it would be the central political framework of the German world, shaping the region's identity while constantly balancing imperial ambition with local autonomy. By the 11th and 12th centuries, this delicate balance came under strain. Popes and emperors clashed in the investiture controversy over who held the right to appoint bishops, a conflict that exposed the limits of imperial power. Meanwhile, flourishing trade routes and the rise of wealthy merchant cities such as Lübeck, Hamburg, and Cologne began to shift influence toward an urban middle class. The German lands were becoming a patchwork of competing powers. Ambitious dukes, independent city-states, and an emperor whose authority often rested on negotiation rather than command. This evolving political landscape would set the stage for dramatic religious and cultural transformations, preparing Germany for one of the most profound upheavals in European history, the Protestant Reformation. By the dawn of the 16th century, the Holy Roman Empire remained vast but fragmented, a tapestry of dukedoms, bishoprics, and independent cities where local rulers often wielded more real power than the emperor himself. This political decentralization created fertile ground for bold new ideas, none more transformative than the religious challenge soon to erupt from within. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. What began as a call to reform the Catholic Church's abuses quickly ignited a revolution. Luther's insistence that salvation came through faith alone, not church rituals, struck a deep chord across the empire. The printing press spread his writings like wildfire, and within a few short years, vast swaths of northern Germany embraced Protestantism. The Reformation fractured the spiritual unity of Europe and plunged the German lands into decades of tension and conflict. Princes and city-states chose sides, some remaining loyal to Rome, others rallying to Luther's cause, both for spiritual conviction and political advantage. These rivalries erupted into open warfare during the 16th and 17th centuries, culminating in the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. The devastation was staggering. Towns burned, populations decimated, and fields left barren. Yet from this chaos emerged a new political order. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 not only ended the war, but also reshaped the empire, granting its many states greater autonomy and marking a turning point in European diplomacy. Germany would remain divided into hundreds of semi-independent entities, its people carrying the scars of war, yet forging a resilience that would shape the next chapters of their history. In the aftermath of the Peace of Westphalia, the German lands stood shattered, yet unmistakably transformed. The Holy Roman Empire survived in name, but real power had shifted permanently to its patchwork of principalities, bishoprics, and free cities. Each ruled with near-sovereign independence, turning the empire into a mosaic of competing interests rather than a unified state. Yet amid the devastation, new centers of influence quietly began to rise. Foremost among them was the Hohenzollern dynasty of Brandenburg, Prussia. In the late 17th century, its rulers pursued relentless military and administrative reforms. By the time of Frederick William, known as the Great Elector, Prussia had forged an efficient army and centralized authority that would soon rival the empire's traditional powers. To the south, the Austrian Habsburgs, though battered by war, tightened their grip on vast territories stretching from Hungary to northern Italy, asserting themselves as defenders of Catholicism and imperial tradition. The 18th century witnessed an escalating rivalry between these two German giants, Austria and Prussia. Their competition shaped not only the politics of the empire, but also the balance of power across Europe. The War of Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War revealed Prussia's growing might, especially under Frederick the Great, whose disciplined forces and enlightened reforms elevated his kingdom into a major European power. Meanwhile, intellectual and cultural currents swept through the German states. The Enlightenment inspired new philosophies, art, and music. Thinkers like Kant and composers like Bach and Mozart reshaped Europe's cultural landscape. Yet politically, Germany remained fragmented, a land of brilliant minds and formidable armies, but without a single national identity. This tension between cultural unity and political division would linger, setting the stage for the revolutionary storms of the 19th century. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the winds of revolution swept across Europe. The French Revolution of 1789 and the meteoric rise of Napoleon Bonaparte sent shockwaves through the German world. Napoleon's armies marched across the Rhine, shattering the centuries-old framework of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1806, Emperor Francis II formally dissolved the empire, bringing to an end an institution that had claimed the mantle of Rome for nearly a millennium. In place of the old imperial order, Napoleon reorganized the region into the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of client states under French influence. Though imposed from outside, these reforms accelerated long-stalled changes. Legal codes were modernized, feudal privileges abolished, and economies shaken into new patterns. But the French domination also stirred deep resentment and a growing sense of shared German identity. Writers, philosophers, and composers began to dream of a cultural and national unity that had never before existed. Napoleon's defeat in 1815 brought the Congress of Vienna, which redrew the map of Europe and created the German Confederation, a loose association of 39 states led by Austria. Yet beneath this seemingly restored order, the desire for unification and liberal reform smoldered. Industrialization was beginning to transform the economy, while a rising middle class demanded constitutional government and national cohesion. Revolutions flared across the German states in 1848 as students, workers, and intellectuals pushed for unity and democratic reforms. Though the uprisings were suppressed, they revealed a powerful undercurrent, the dream of a single German nation. In the decades ahead, that dream would find a new and forceful champion, Prussia, setting the stage for a dramatic unification that would forever alter the European balance of power. In the wake of the failed revolutions of 1848, it was clear that the path to German unity would not be forged through liberal assemblies or peaceful debate. Instead, it would be shaped by the hard edge of realpolitik and the ambitions of one rising power, Prussia. At the center of this movement stood a master strategist, Otto von Bismarck. Appointed Prussia's minister-president in 1862, Bismarck dismissed the idealism of parliaments and speeches. He believed that the future of Germany would be decided, as he famously declared, by blood and iron. Bismarck skillfully maneuvered Prussia through a series of calculated wars that reshaped the political landscape. First came the short, decisive conflict against Denmark in 1864, which secured control of the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. Then, in 1866, Prussia turned on Austria in the Austro-Prussian War. In just 7 weeks, Prussia's modern army crushed the Habsburg forces, excluding Austria from German affairs and creating the North German Confederation under Prussian leadership. The final act came in 1870, when tensions with France erupted into the Franco-Prussian War. The swift Prussian victory electrified the German states, uniting them in a surge of national pride. On January 18, 1871, in the glittering Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed German Emperor. The German Empire, Das Kaiserreich, was born. Under Bismarck's iron hand, the new empire rapidly industrialized, becoming one of the world's great economic and military powers. Yet the unification left unresolved questions about regional identities and political freedoms. Germany had at last become a single nation, but the methods of its creation hinted at future conflicts that would echo far beyond Europe's borders. The newly forged German Empire entered the late 19th century with astonishing momentum. Industry boomed, coal and steel production soared, railways knit the empire together, and new chemical and electrical technologies placed Germany at the forefront of modern science and engineering. Berlin emerged as a vibrant capital of innovation and culture. Yet beneath this economic miracle, tensions brewed. Chancellor Bismarck, wary of internal divisions, sought to balance competing forces. He forged social welfare programs to temper the growing socialist movement, while simultaneously cracking down on it with strict laws. Abroad, he maintained a complex network of alliances to keep Germany secure and prevent the very wars he feared might shatter Europe's fragile peace. But in 1890, Kaiser Wilhelm II dismissed the cautious Bismarck, determined to chart a more assertive course. Under Wilhelm's rule, Germany embraced an ambitious policy of Weltpolitik, world politics, seeking colonial possessions and building a navy to rival Britain's. This boldness unsettled the European balance of power and deepened rivalries with France, Britain, and Russia. National pride surged, but so did the possibility of conflict. By the early 20th century, Europe had become a powder keg of alliances and rising militarism. When the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 triggered the First World War, Germany found itself at the center of a global catastrophe. 4 years of brutal trench warfare left millions dead and the empire exhausted. In 1918, facing military defeat and domestic unrest, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. The armistice that followed ended the war but imposed harsh conditions in the Treaty of Versailles, stripping Germany of territory, colonies, and pride. The once mighty empire lay shattered, its people burdened by economic hardship and political turmoil, a nation searching for identity amid the wreckage of war. Germany emerged from the First World War a defeated and disoriented nation. In the wake of Kaiser Wilhelm II's abdication, the Weimar Republic was proclaimed in 1919, a bold, democratic experiment built on fragile foundations. Its leaders signed the Treaty of Versailles, accepting punishing reparations and territorial losses that humiliated the nation and fueled widespread resentment. The economy staggered under the weight of war debts. Hyperinflation in the early 1920s reduced savings to worthless paper, and ordinary Germans struggled to afford even basic necessities. Yet amid the turmoil, the Weimar years also became a time of dazzling cultural and intellectual creativity. Berlin pulsed with avant-garde art, groundbreaking cinema, and daring new architecture like the Bauhaus movement. Writers, thinkers, and musicians pushed the boundaries of modern expression, turning the capital into a beacon of innovation. But political life remained bitterly divided. Extremists on the far left and right exploited economic pain and national humiliation, undermining the fragile democracy. The Great Depression of 1929 delivered the final blow. As unemployment soared and despair deepened, radical voices gained power. Among them was Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party, promising to restore German pride, overturn Versailles, and revive economic strength. By 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor. Within months, he dismantled democratic institutions and established a totalitarian regime. The Weimar Republic's brief experiment in democracy had ended. In its place rose a dictatorship that would plunge the world into an even greater catastrophe. Germany once again stood at the heart of a global drama, this time as the architect of a conflict whose scale and horror the world had never before witnessed. Hitler's rise to power in 1933 transformed Germany into a totalitarian state almost overnight. The Nazi regime consolidated control with ruthless efficiency, banning political opposition, silencing the press, and turning the police and courts into instruments of terror. A toxic ideology of racial purity became the regime's guiding principle. Jews, Roma, political dissidents, and other targeted groups were stripped of rights and subjected to systematic persecution, setting the stage for crimes that would stain history forever. Driven by an ambition to remake Europe, Hitler embarked on an aggressive campaign of expansion. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war. World War II had begun. The early years of the conflict brought stunning victories. The swift fall of France in 1940, the domination of much of Europe, and a pact with the Soviet Union that briefly secured Germany's eastern flank. But the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 and the entry of the United States into the war shifted the balance. As the war raged, the Nazis implemented the final solution, the systematic genocide of Europe's Jews. Millions were murdered in ghettos, mass shootings, and extermination camps such as Auschwitz, a horror that would become known as the Holocaust. By 1944, Germany was in retreat on all fronts. Allied forces closed in from the west, while Soviet armies advanced from the east. In April 1945, as Berlin lay in ruins, Hitler took his own life. Germany surrendered unconditionally days later. The war left the nation devastated, its cities reduced to rubble, its population shattered, and its moral conscience scarred by the atrocities committed in its name. Germany's surrender in May 1945 ended the deadliest war in human history, but left the nation in ruins, physically, politically, and morally. Its cities were flattened by relentless bombing. Millions were homeless, hungry, and traumatized. The victorious Allies divided the country into 4 occupation zones: American, British, French, and Soviet, each administering its sector while grappling with the colossal task of rebuilding a society stained by Nazi crimes. In the West, the Allies sought to rebuild Germany as a democratic bulwark against Soviet influence. The Nuremberg trials exposed the full horror of Nazi atrocities, holding leading figures accountable and forcing the nation to confront its dark past. Meanwhile, the onset of the Cold War deepened the division between the Soviet-controlled East and the Western zones. By 1949, 2 separate states emerged: the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, aligned with the United States and Western Europe, and the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, a Soviet-style socialist state. West Germany, under Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, embarked on an astonishing recovery. With help from the Marshall Plan and driven by a spirit of reconstruction, the Wirtschaftswunder, economic miracle, transformed the West into a prosperous democracy and a key member of the new European community. East Germany, meanwhile, developed a rigid communist system under tight Soviet control, its citizens facing surveillance and limited freedoms. Berlin, divided by ideology and later by the infamous Berlin Wall, became the Cold War's most potent symbol, a city split between competing visions of the future. For decades, Germany stood at the very front line of the global struggle between East and West, its division a reminder of both the cost of war and the unfinished journey toward national unity. For 4 tense decades, the 2 Germanys embodied the fault line of the Cold War. West Germany thrived as a liberal democracy, joining NATO and helping to build the European Economic Community, while its economy surged to become one of the strongest in the world. East Germany, meanwhile, remained firmly under the grip of the Soviet Union. Its centrally planned economy lagged behind the prosperity of the West, and the feared Stasi secret police kept a watchful eye on every aspect of daily life. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, became the starkest symbol of this division, a concrete scar slicing through the heart of a once united city. Families were separated overnight. Loved ones waved across barbed wire and concrete, while daring escape attempts became legendary acts of courage and defiance. Yet beneath the surface, the desire for unity and freedom never died. West Germans looked east with a mixture of sorrow and determination, while East Germans quietly nurtured hopes of one day breaking free. By the 1980s, cracks began to appear in the Eastern Bloc. Economic stagnation, growing public frustration, and the reformist winds of Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost and perestroika policies weakened the Soviet grip. Peaceful protests swelled in East German cities, demanding political reform and open borders. Then, on the night of November 9, 1989, the unthinkable happened. The East German government announced that its citizens could cross freely into the West. Jubilant crowds surged to the checkpoints, tearing chunks from the Berlin Wall with their bare hands. The fall of the wall did more than reunite a city. It signaled the approaching end of the Cold War itself. Less than a year later, in October 1990, the 2 Germanys formally became one nation once more, completing a historic journey from devastation to reunification. Reunification was a triumph, but it came with daunting challenges. Decades of separation had left deep economic and social divides. The East faced crumbling infrastructure and widespread unemployment as its outdated industries struggled to compete in a market economy. Billions of marks were poured into rebuilding roads, schools, and cities, while West Germans shouldered heavy taxes to support the transition. Though the path was not without tension, the shared dream of a united homeland gave Germans the resolve to persevere. As the 21st century dawned, Germany re-emerged as a powerhouse of Europe. Its commitment to renewable energy and advanced engineering earned it the reputation of an industrial and technological leader. Berlin, once a symbol of division, blossomed into a vibrant cultural capital, its streets alive with art, music, and history. From the Brandenburg Gate to the remnants of the wall, the city became a living monument to the power of reconciliation. Germany also assumed a leading role within the European Union, shaping policy on economics, migration, and climate change. It faced moments of crisis, financial turmoil in the Eurozone, debates over immigration, and the challenge of preserving democracy in an age of populism. But each test reinforced the resilience of its institutions and the unity of its people. Today, Germany stands as a nation forged through struggle and renewal. From the ashes of war to the triumph of reunification, its story is one of perseverance, transformation, and hope, a testament to how a country can confront its darkest chapters, embrace change, and emerge stronger, guiding Europe into a shared future.